ask you a question. When was the Ten Commandments put into effect?
From creation.
Creation.
How can you prove it?
It's been the law of God forever. The universe attests to it. Every 7 days, the universe gets quieter than it is for 6.
Okay, that's one way. But you can figure this out by reading it, because what did Cain do? He committed murder. Right? One of the Ten Commandments is thou shalt not murder. And the Lord asked him to worship the way he asked. So that's one way you know, but the Ten Commandments has always been in effect because Sister White says they were. But you need to prove it by the Bible. If you know, turn to Genesis 26 verse 5. It says Abraham kept his commandments, his statutes, and his laws. And that was long before Sinai, wasn't it? Way before Sinai. So Abraham kept the commandments. Adam and Eve kept the Sabbath. So that's part of the Ten Commandments. But you need to be ready when people, you tell them that, they'll always say, well, that was for the Jews. No, it wasn't. It was for everybody, including me and you. The Sabbath was instituted as a memorial to God's creation. He didn't need to rest, but he figured everybody else needed to rest after they worked 6 days. Sometimes I have to work, I work and I rest sometime during the day. But still, it's, he gives you a day of rest. And the day you're supposed to take care of it, that day. You're not supposed to do anything in it. Except think about Jesus, talk about him, read about him, witness whenever you have a chance. Regarding the giving of God's law at Sinai, we are told the law was not spoken at this time exclusively for the benefit of the Hebrews. God honored them by making them the guardians and keeping of the law. But it was to be held as a sacred trust for the whole entire world. The precepts of the Decalogue are adapted to all mankind. And they were given for instruction and the government for all. 10 precepts. Brief, comprehensive, authoritative, cover the duty of man to God and to his fellow man, and all based upon the fundamental principles of love. So when God created the universe, the Ten Commandments was, he put a lot of love in it. If you look at those 10 Commandments, they cover about everything that goes on in this world. You just got to read and understand it thoroughly. See, for the Lord has given you the Sabbath. This was the scripture this morning. Therefore, he gives you on the 6th day bread for 2 days, that every man remain in his place, that no man go out of his place on the 7th day. Now, what kind of bread did he give them on the Sabbath?
Manna.
Manna. Now, why did he say you collect twice as much on Friday as you did there during the week?
Because on the Sabbath, it would be like working for them to go out and collect it.
Exactly right. Because before, when you collected each day, if you didn't eat it all that day, by morning it was rotten. It was bad. But he told them to pick two days worth, Friday and Sabbath. And they did, and it never spoiled, everything was fine. It was good for them. So there was a reason why he did things. And sometimes we don't understand the reason. Sabbath was not instituted, as many claim, when the law was given at Sinai, because, or before the Israelites came to Sinai, they understood the Sabbath to be obligatory upon them. They were worshiping the Sabbath, but most of the time during their slavery area, not many did that. There were some that kept the Sabbath, and there were some that didn't. The institution of the Sabbath is proclaimed basically in Genesis 2 when the episode of the divine episode of rest. Also, the way to the desert, some Israelites resisted keeping the Sabbath properly. The Lord exhorted them, "How long do you refuse to keep my commandments?" in 16:28 of Exodus. Kind of represents us today, doesn't it? We're still doing the same things that the Israelites did back when they come out of slavery. Are we really following God's law? Are we teaching others to follow the law? Are we showing why we keep the law? Exodus 16:30, where we read that the people rested on the seventh day, and it's probably an allusion to Genesis 2:2, where we find the account of God resting on the seventh day. The fact that God provided a special day of rest illustrates his concern for the well-being of his people and how, in a special way, he provides an opportunity for their spiritual growth. Many times the people did their own thing, such as they built that calf out of gold from all the earrings and stuff that they had at that time. Was the wrath of God there? Yes, he was. And who was at fault? Aaron. He could have stopped it, but he didn't. So we all make mistakes, but God forgives us our mistakes, as long as we don't just keep building them up and keeping them. One of the great teachings of Exodus 16 is that both the gift of the manna and the Sabbath are seen as manifestations of God's providence in supplying the needs for his people. In their pilgrimage through the desert, the Israelites witnessed a triple miracle that served to impress upon their minds the holiness of the Sabbath. Each Friday, a double portion, as we talked a while ago, of manna was given to them for Friday and Saturday. Nothing was sent. The portion reserved for the Sabbath remained healthy and wholesome, as we talked about. Believers should follow his divine counsel regarding the observance of Sabbath. Exodus 30 tells us that the Israelites rested on the seventh day. We should recognize that we also have a Sabbath appointment with God every Sabbath. We should set aside all common affairs of life and have full communion with him. This is explicitly declared in Exodus 20:10. In it you shall not do any work. Now I want to ask y'all a question. How about nurses working on the Sabbath in the hospital?
God didn't say we couldn't do good things. God didn't say we couldn't do good and care for others. He didn't say that.
No, he didn't. He said it's not unlawful to do good on the Sabbath. The main thing is that most nurses, including my wife, did not do anything more than what they had to do to take care of the patients. The patients was the most important thing. So God created that situation. You got nurses, doctors, and they put them there to take care of them. The same way with a nursing home. I would say the majority of the people in nursing homes cannot really do much for themselves. Because I know I worked in one.
Back in that time, there wasn't a nursing home.
No, it wasn't a nursing home at that time. In fact, I would say maybe there wasn't such a real doctor. They had some that was called doctors. But anyhow, I have a friend of mine, Brother Frank Breedenkamp. He used to go to the Waynesburg church. And, one day he didn't show up for church. We got worried about him. Frank had already got ready, dressed, and was getting ready to go to church. And he noticed his neighbor was trying to crank his lawnmower and it wouldn't work. So what did Frank do? He walked back in the house, put on some different clothes, and went over to help the man get his lawnmower started. And his theory was that's not unlawful to do good on the Sabbath. He was helping his neighbor, even though he wasn't supposed to be working on the Sabbath, but he was helping him to get his lawnmower started. There's a gentleman that was a plumber. He did a lot of plumbing on Sabbath, but never charged for it. If people call him and have problems, evidence or non-evidence, he would go fix it. And it was his best way of witnessing to them that he didn't charge them anything for what he did, because this was the Lord's day, and he's helping them to take care of themselves. So we're not supposed to actually do any work on the Sabbath that we can do the other 6 days. Now, what if you have no electricity? Like my brother-in-law called me last night. He had 10 minutes on his phone before it run out. They had a severe thunderstorm, and he had no electricity whatsoever. So I don't know whether he come back on or not. I don't even know whether he made it to church. But sometimes things happen that we have to do, and I'll give you a good example. I was at the Farmville Church back when my wife was administrator of the nursing home, and somebody told us that, Myrna, this calls from you from the nursing home. So she wouldn't answer it. She comes, she said, honey, we gotta go to the nursing home. I said, what's the matter? She said, we got a water busted line in the attic. I said, oh no. So I drove from the church on High Street to my house in 20 minutes. I was flying low. Changed clothes, went over to the nursing home, got up in the attic. Somebody was supposed to join, you have one of these, I can't remember the name, it's a connection that you, once you push the thing in, it locks.
Compression fitting.
Huh?
Compression fitting.
That's it. And it popped loose. So water was in that room, coming down through the ceiling. So I got up there, and I don't know how many ever worked in an attic with trusses. They go like this way, and that way. And the only way I could get to it was I had to lay across the trusses that way. And that was not comfortable. And so it happened, I took the pressure fitting I had and took it up with me. And my son at that time come in and he hollered up and said, Dad, what can I do? I said, go outside and turn the water off. Because I said, I don't think I got it clean off. It was still leaking. So he turned that off, and then I got the first one on here, but I had to take this one and pull it into that one, laying down across the rafters. Finally, the Lord's help, I got it fixed. And somebody asked me, said, well, you were working. I said, I was doing good on the Sabbath because what was it doing? It was affecting all the masons in the building because the water was bad. They had no water. They couldn't take showers, they couldn't cook, they couldn't do anything. So the Lord blessed me and I got it fixed. But it wasn't easy. But God gives us strength and courage to do things each day. We just don't realize what He's doing. The delivery of the 10 Commandments is preceded by the presentation of the giver of the law. I am the Lord your God. Exodus 20, verse 2. Thus God approaches the children once more. How many times did He do that? Many. reminds the Israelites that he is the one who gave them new life. I brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Obedience to God's law is including the observance of Sabbath. Including the observance of Sabbath proclaims how our dependency on God and our freedom from other powers. Exodus 20 verse 8, the word remember is the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Clarify that this is an establishment of a new institution. With the words remember and keep it holy, it becomes evident that the Sabbath and the wall for God's people, a reminder of that which God has been doing to keep the community holy. The reason I'm talking about this morning is, I don't know how many of I've been talking to HW and Johnny back here in the back. Before long, we won't even have any money in our pocket. They're making, it's a technological coin that they can tell what you're spending, what you're buying, where you're going, and what you're doing. It's in the process. Now think about that. The Bible says there'll be a time when you won't able to buy or sell. If you don't have this coin, you won't be able to buy or sell. It's electronic. And it's being talked about. Now, when it goes into effect, I don't know. But it's pointing to a lot of things in Revelation that's going to happen. We just need to be ready. And being ready is walking with Jesus. Are we ready to do that? The commandment underscores the need for Sabbath rest for human beings and for animals. On Sabbath, the hierarchical relations also cease, and everyone shares equally the freedom offered to God. Another question I ask you. This gentleman's an Adventist. My wife and I went over to his wife in the house to do the evening. Well, he has a horse at the barn. He went out in the barn and was showing me the horse. Well, that was nice. I had no problem with that. But he did something I didn't really approve with. I didn't say anything, because he was an Adventist and knew what was supposed to be. He took a rope, put on this side of the horse's head and one on this side of the head to stabilize him. And then he began to brush him. Now to me, that was working. That's something you could do other days of the week. I didn't say anything, but he looked at me like, are you going to say something? I determined not to say anything because he knew better. But this was the spur of the moment. He did this thing, and I didn't agree with it, but it's his life, and I can't control it. The seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. That means God not only designates Sabbath as a day of rest for humanity, but also places the seal of authority on it and sanctions it as his day, making it one of the characteristics of the people, his people. We know that in the end time that the Sabbath worship is going to be one of the factors in the end time. Well, Satan wants us to worship him. So he's doing everything he can to take as many with him as he can. But we've got to be on the alert and be ready as Ephesians were, Paul was telling Ephesians they need to walk with God and not fall back in the old ways. I mean, it's going to come a time when it's going to test us. And the thing is, are we ready? Do we know what the Bible says, what will happen? There's things it will tell you. We just got to remember. When God says, in it you shall do no work, he does not imply that Sabbath is a day of inactivity, but that is a different from the rest of the week. It's a day of service to God, a time to be with Him, and a day to worship Him and remember His redeeming acts. Thus, His believers should be recognized as His people. In Exodus 20, in the parallel text of Deuteronomy 5, Sabbath combines two aspects of worship to God. He is both creator and redeemer. The Sabbath motivation in Exodus 20:11 is a Christian-centered God presented as creator and keeper of the world, because Sabbath is anchored in creative work of the God of heaven and active work of the God of heaven and earth. The government to keep the Sabbath takes a universal character. In turn, the emphasis in Deuteronomy 5:15 relates to the salvation of human beings. Sabbath bears the seal of God as the deliverer. How many times have you all heard people say that the Sabbath is done away with? Multitude?
Yeah.
Always? What's the first quotation you could give them that the Sabbath is real?
Well, God said, Jesus said that He did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law. And nothing should be changed in the law.
And another one is, Jesus says, if ye love me, keep my commandments. And the two others that I usually throw at them, and of course they think the book of Revelation is a closed book, a lot of them, is Revelation 12:17 and Revelation 14:12. Does anybody know what that says? Here are the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the testimonies of Jesus Christ. And the other one said, here are the patience of the saints, those who keep the Sabbath commandment and the testimonies of Jesus. They're both talking about the Sabbath. I said, well, now, if they were done way back here, how come it's over here? And they can't answer me. Or they won't. But you got to be ready to give an answer to when somebody approaches you with a question. And my biggest comeback is, if they ask me a question, I'll say, where did you get that? I'm not putting them on the defensive, I'm asking where they got it. So they need to tell me for me to believe it. The Sabbath was established by God to be observed by humanity. At Sinai, He provided a means for the people to learn in a practical way the meaning of the Sabbath as they crossed the desert. The Sabbath was established as a memorial of God's creative work. As we keep the seventh day of the week holy, we recognize God is our creator and our keeper. The observance of the Sabbath also reminds us of redeeming work. Observing the Sabbath doesn't just mean receiving the distinctive sign of those who belong to God's people on earth. It also demonstrates that He will keep the promise He made to the faithful. I will cause you to ride on the high hills of the earth and feed you with the heritage of Jacob. Isaiah 58:14. May the blessing of the Sabbath be on each one of you as you observe it and go forward. The Sabbath is, I've heard so many Protestants talk about the Sabbath, but about 80% of it they don't discuss in the Bible. They use what their point is trying to make, that the Sabbath was done away with, we don't use it anymore. In fact, my friend Wayne Sheffield sent me an article one day of this guy who talked about the Sabbath. And I read that article, and I didn't see Sabbath in there but 4 times. But in no way did it mention that it was the true Sabbath. He was making the point that the Sabbath was done away with. that we would follow that. But the Roman Catechism says what? The church changed it, but they said, if you're gonna keep the Sabbath, that you ought to be with the seventh day as a church. In fact, I have a little book about that thick at home with the Roman Catechisms, and it's in that. But that's what they say. Sometimes Satan will try to get in an argument with people. Don't fall for it. It's a way of getting you to maybe do something you didn't think about doing. But he always knows what to do. He knows how to tweak our mind. Because he knows our actions. He sees them every day, what we do and what we don't do. And I'm just as guilty as anybody else. I'm like Paul. I'm the worst of sinners. But thank the Lord. He knows all of my problems and all the things that I do, and he still loves me anyway. As he loves each one of you all. He'll never desert you. He'll always be with you wherever you go and whatever you do. Just like he was with you, Johnny, when you were driving your car a little too fast. I've done that. And it's scary. You get to going too fast and the car starts to rocking like this, and you go around a curve and it's still doing the same thing, and you wonder if you're going to make the curve. The Lord protected me all this time. Didn't realize that he was doing it. So we do. I reckon, what did it say? The Lord protected me when I got old because I was young and dumb and did all these things.
The reason I'm old and wise is because the Lord protected me when I was young and stupid.
Stupid is right. Thank you, Chuck.
I was guilty.
That's both of us, right? Some of the stupidest things we've ever done, the Lord takes care of us. In fact, I know he took care of me because two times I almost drowned. I was at this man-made lake. I was swimming, and I reached over to grab the ladder handle, and I missed it, and I went straight down. And I paddled myself right back up to that, right to the ladder. And then another time I was swimming in the creek, stepped on a muddy bank and went under the water. And so happened my friend was there that pulled me up. So doing something young and stupid, I've done it up and down. But I pray that God will keep us all in care, take care of us, whatever we do. And just remember, the Sabbath day is going to be a test in the end of time. And be ready for it, because we don't know what hour he comes. And the only thing I can ever tell people is be ready all the time. Don't wait until the last minute to do something. So, may God bless each one of you today as we continue our rest of our day. May he guide us and keep us safe as we travel home. Our closing hymn,